very welcome to a new Music Evolves episode. I'm your host, Sean Martin. I hope you're ready for today. Today is going to be amazing. I have a good friend with me, Shagghie, aka Scott Scheferman. How are you, man?
Good. It's good to be here again. Good to see your face, hear your voice.
It's good to see and hear you too. And I love what you create. You and your wife create as well. Um, and we've had a lot of conversations over the years on technology and music and all kinds of stuff outside of the whole music world. But anytime I get to chat with you about music, I get super pumped. This is gonna be fun. You you inspire me. I have too many toys now, gadgets, thanks to you, because I love what you do, and I love being able to create, not like you do, but create the way you do.
Mm,
Or at least attempt to. And so we're going to talk a bit about that today. I think we'll
yeah.
probably talk a little about what is creativity and where does the human start and stop. um, so we'll get into some of that fun stuff too. But and hear some things which I'm excited for as well. But for folks who are not fortunate enough to know who you are yet, a little bit about Shagghie.
Well, since the topic here is music and not specifically AI and certainly not cyber, we did never, of course, probably at least 10, 12 years ago now. It's been a minute. It's flown by. But yeah, I've been doing cyber for 30 years. So that's how I know a lot of your community, Sean, of course, historically. But then also all of our mutual friends like Chris Roberts and countless others that like to life hack or create or play jazz or make techno or whatever we do, these weird things we do as kind of hacker personalities. So I've been doing that for a while as well. Kind of for me, it kind of began as a club kid in the 90s trying to figure out how to make techno. And that evolved into, well, I guess I'm still trying to make techno some 30 years later. But yeah, that's my genre is techno, acid, house. But I also do some electronica we might hear a little bit later with my wife, which keeps the marriage fresh and alive and fun. Yeah.
Super fun. And uh, so we from based on our connection in a different industry outside of music, recognize the term hacker. And that conjures up a certain view for us, maybe a different view for others in the industry, and particularly in marketing and then in media. But then outside of technology and cybersecurity, the word hacker, I think, may not resonate with folks, or they may have a completely different picture, probably based on the media. And
Yeah.
what I want to get your perspective, and I'm just going to say this quickly, is that I think you're using it interchangeably in the sense of creating. And we've had a conversation on this where I think you led me to a book by Herbie Hancock, where basically he's hacking the heck out of stuff, right, to create music.
Yeah.
And so his autobiography I listened to on Audible. So I encourage people to check that out. But describe the term hacker for the music audience, what you mean there, and how does that relate to creativity and creating stuff?
Well, you could take that question so many different ways, but to start at kind of like the middle altitude of just common sensory, these days, obviously, hacker has all the connotations that I don't even need to explain to you because you've heard it so many times. It's in the news every day. But back in the 90s, when I began hacking, even on computer hacking, let alone also music making, I was also into modding cars with my father. He and I have been restoring classic cars from the 60s, Italian cars, right? Then Fiats, Alfa Romeos. And my dad always associated himself, he's a Marine, he associated himself as a hacker, and which just meant somebody who kind of thought outside the box and was kind of like OCD obsessive about, let's say, repairing a dual Weber carb setup on a VW Bug or a Fiat, right? Like, and the nuance and the esoterica and the kind of intention of focusing your mind in a space and time where you're just trying to either break something so that you can make something go faster, or you're trying to fix something that is broken, and you still have to apply the same hacking methodology to either one of those problems. At the end of the day, all hacking is truly just a mindset and an equal amounts appreciation for that mindset of being in a moment, be willing to go until you hit a wall that you know you will hit indeed, and figuring out how to get around that wall through either persistence or creativity or a combination of both until you get to some next wall. And you don't even always know that there is a diamond at the end, some reward that you might find or that you deserve. The actual pursuit is its reward. And that there, I think if I had to put a hammer on it, that is hacking. Like realizing that it's a process, that it is its own reward, regardless of what destination you've chosen to pursue: music, computers, cars, whatever it is.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna bring up this story because there was a moment where I was like trying to figure out some things in life, and Marco, my co-founder, he said, "Here, take my guitar. It gives me great peace when I play it." And I thought, sure, I've kind of messed around with the guitar a little bit here and there. I'd never really stuck with it. I took it, and it did quite the opposite. It gave me angst because I wasn't prepared to hack it. I wasn't prepared to go on that journey. Fast forward a few months later, I get another guitar, not his. I get another one, and for some reason, I was in the right headspace to just attack this thing, and I could feel it, I could experience it, I could see that the journey of that process was rewarding and fulfilling, and I started to hack learning the guitar. I'm not great by any stretch. You won't see me playing on Music Evolves anytime soon, perhaps one day. But the point is that it wasn't until my mind was ready to take that journey that I was able to take that journey and experience what I was hoping to experience with the guitar.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think of I'm just quickly another story because I'm hoping these two things will trigger some additional thoughts for you. Just the process of, because we're going to talk tech here as well, the process of making music. So there's picking up an acoustic guitar, slightly different than plugging one into an amp and some pedals and maybe manipulating those and not knowing how they work, to full on recording vocals and multi-tracks of music across different instruments and leveling and producing and understanding all of that technology. And I can see where sometimes hitting a wall with one piece of tech getting in the way of the process, breaking down the creativity process, right? If you're stopping to fix a plugin in Pro Tools and you're in the middle of recording an audio, a vocal track, your whole experience, your journey of creating that vocal is disrupted. So let's I don't know. I'll just leave it there. Your thoughts on those two stories?
Well, you mentioned a guitar versus plugging an electric guitar into an amp, and that is such a great, everybody can relate to that difference. I go down crazy rabbit holes with modular synthesizers, applying logic and subtractive synthesis and other types of synthesis to like some crazy wormhole, and that might give me joy, but it's very low odds that it will actually make music that anybody else would want to hear ever, right? And conversely, you can go down the streets of New York or London and you have somebody sitting there with some pots and pans and some trash cans turned upside down, and they're literally making the best techno you've ever heard in your life, and just with their hands and utensils. So music is interesting. I've always thought that the reason why we like music and making music is because it brings us back to some early form of ourself, maybe thousands or millions of years ago, where we were just in nature, and nature has its own cadence, its own rhythms of streams and wind and branches squeaking and banging against each other, and animals singing like melody, and echoes through caves that are make us draw in because there's a reverb. That reverb pedal you put on your guitar that plugs into your amp. That reverb puts you in a space that's physical, that's different than the one you're actually standing in, right? So reverb is very powerful because it puts you in an ambient. So I was like, music brings you back to some form of roots of just being a critter here on Earth, And I think that's why we like it. And then when you hack at music, it puts you both in the kind of the soundscape of your roots, but also the mindscape of your roots, where you're if you're, I'm going to use a dumb example, but if you're trying to figure out how to make fire, and you're a caveman, let's say, like a stereotypical one, trying to with a flint and a rock, right, trying to make fire, like you're hacking that problem. You're figuring out how to farm. You're figuring out just life but at its core, at its most simple kind of hands-on tactile way. And that's like when you work on a car and you wrench, it's the same thing. You're using your hands just like you bend branches back then, art with a paintbrush. If you've got moisture and color does things to you that it used to do to us back in nature before there was society and an industrial revolution. So I feel like that's really why hacking at Eve itself is so beautiful, is because it brings you back to your stasis and gets you out of your thought process of this busy life, especially now. We don't even need to talk about it. It's almost a meme to talk about how overloaded we are with information overload and distraction and attention economy disorders.
That's a whole other topic of discussion for sure.
Yes, let's not even go there. It's almost boring.
But I think your point of turning to music, and maybe the listeners can relate to this as well, even if they're not creating music, consuming music can often take us to places. And I don't know for you, but when I'm creating something, to your point, the stuff I make will never see the light of day. It's just for me. Nobody probably wants to hear it. They certainly don't want to hear me sing, even if I do put those tracks down. But I consume them, and they bring me to a place. And I consume a ton of other music. We just did a podcast before joining you talking about vinyl and the resurgence of vinyl and comparison into streaming. And the gentleman who's running the conference Making Vinyl was saying that there is a place for streaming and he pointed to discovery.
Yeah.
And I use the heck out of that for discovery. So I think there's creating, consume, but both, I think, take us to different places. I did a poll. I didn't intend to connect it to this conversation, but I did a poll on LinkedIn. And I redid it on Threads to see if I get a different response. But I asked folks from a live music perspective, do you prefer acoustic, kind of the pure and unplugged, versus a raw and amplified, versus an enhanced experience with effects and pedals? And what about digital tracks and backing tracks to kind of bring a fuller sound? Acoustic, far and out, won. Pedals and effects got 0.
Yeah.
Which struck me, because I don't know, well, certainly any rock band, you're going to have pedals and effects. So maybe it's a specific style. But I go back to my NAMM experience in LA, and there are thousands of pedals. So it's interesting that it seemed like a disconnect here, but I guess where I'm going to is what we use to create. Maybe people don't realize that they're listening to effects and pedals, even if they don't see effects and pedals. I don't know. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I make techno, and techno is nothing less and nothing more than totally abusing effects pedals to do things that the designer had no idea that you'd end up doing, and just getting crazy, just experimental, I don't know, mind fuckery, for lack of a better, pardon my French, right? Like, it's just out there, kind of, it puts you out there. And this, obviously, a lot of the stuff came out of the late 50s, certainly through the 60s, and definitely into the early 70s. And that era was, even for synthesis and drum machines, was so experimental. Everything you heard felt like you were hearing something for the first time in human existence. My dad still describes in the Philippines in the 60s when he turned on a stereo radio and his brain couldn't figure out that there were different parts on pan left versus right. And he literally didn't know how to process that experience for the first time in his life. So effects are nothing more than like trying to take the mind and tickle it into a place perhaps it hasn't been, or they're trying to put the instrument into a space. I mean, anyway, not to get musically technical and preach to the choir, literally here.
Well,
You get it.
I want to get technical, but
Hmm.
let me ask you this: do you think that good music brings us to a place or captures us in a way we're not focused on how or why it was done a certain way? So we hear the effects and pedals, and or as a sign of good music, we're going to make you realize that we're panning left and right, and
I,
we want you to twig and tweak. Or is there an answer there?
Yeah, I feel like the more, and when you're discussing music or hacking, you ask either or questions, the answer is always going to be it's
Right.
gray as hell and context dependent, just like our cyber conversations. But yeah, I mean, my wife does canvas art. That's one of hers behind me. I don't know if you can see that, but that's part of
Yep.
hers. And I go to these art shows all the time, and I talk to artists. And lately, I've been looking on the walls, and I'll see a piece that the compositionally, I hate to say this, it's almost blasphemy to say this, but I know they did not construct the composition of that themselves, and that it was AI that they then used to build on top of and apply, paint or media to it, and interpret it in a certain way that is definitely art and artistic as hell. But I know that let's say the composition of the painting, or so it's like this with everything in music. It's content that there are people that are diehard fans of mine that I don't know why they listen to my music more than I ever will. And more than anybody should, that's healthy, and they just love that they're hearing something that they associate with when they're making. Almost all those people are musicians themselves. They're not like people that go rave and dance. You know what I mean? Because my techno is not big room techno. It's more organic 90s analog style, manually produced techno. So you can't even hear that in the clubs today because it doesn't even translate in terms of like the finish and the polish and the production that's put atop it, right? So everything, even AI affects all that. Oh my God, this conversation can go 1,000 ways right now. Where would you like to take it, Sean? Because starting to get warmed up.
I'm going to pause you though, because you talked about jacking up pedals.
Yeah.
Making them do what the manufacturer never thought they should do. I think that's what you described with Herbie Hancock, and he describes in his book what he did with the keyboards and the synthesizers and whatnot. What does that mean? Hacking the pedal, messing with it, making it do when it's not supposed to do. Are you opening up, doing with wires, or
that's great.
Things, or what are you doing?
So open up that file that's image 2559. Not that we labeled these into human happy for. Yeah, okay. So that's my desk right over there. It's about 20 feet away. I'm in my music studio right now, and most people will look at that and say blah. WTF? I see some pretty colors over there on the right. I see a mixer, something I recognize as a mixer, but I really don't know what that modular Eurorack thing is. And that Russian tube amp thing on the far right, that is actually a 303 synthesizer made with vacuum tube circuits instead of analog circuits. These are things people know. And what you also is hard to make out unless you're kind of zooming, I suppose. But there are a ton of pedals that are kind of in the middle in that dark area between the left and the right. And those pedals, some of them are, a guitar pedal, the reverb, distortion, delays, these are basic effects. But I really have seen lately, I would say in the last 10 years, certainly the last 5 or 6, where the pedal manufacturers are themselves saying, no, I'm not going to make another reverb pedal. I'm going to make a reverb pedal that's got 2 AI algorithms that will pan left and right, and then use phase cancellation to create a negative vacuum space with reverb around it, so that your panosphere, if you will, is artificially modified in a way that makes you disoriented. Now, maybe you run a drum machine through that, or a voice, or a 303 synthesizer. It's just like the pedal manufacturers, Sean, are just gone so far off the deep end. They're almost crazier than some of the modules that I play with Eurorack, right? Like they're super, and they also have more than sound processing. And they adopted the kind of the subtractive synthesis Eurorack meta, if you will, and they've added a lot of what you call logic. So if then statements, or if this and this, then also that will happen. And if as that happens, it'll route it through a different analog circuit and then recombine it through a mixer, and then you'll get the effect, right? So you have like timing logic that's beat or percussive based, if you will, or divisible by the original accent. You have envelopes, which is the shape of the sound, that are algorithmically modified on the beats of a delay. So before you have an analog delay, which is like bam, bap, 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 like a tape delay. But now you have bam, bap, bap, beep, boop, boop, beep, 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 all those kind of things are going on. And usually it sounds like ass, quite frankly. Most of this algorithmic stuff has sounded so bad for the last 10 years. I'm actually excited that the AI is getting so efficient and reduced algorithmically that it's starting to sound good finally. Like, you know what I mean? There's this period of time where it just sounded really bad. But here we are.
Yeah, I think we have, I guess, fitting basically software, right? Software on the pedals, and it's maybe it's more like a BIOS because you're not updating it necessarily, right? So if once it's there, I know I have seen pedals where you control them with your phone, right? So clearly there's software running that's remote access. I don't know. Maybe let's talk about that, because you started with analog. They have some algorithms on them. Are you messing with the algorithms, or are you messing with the? You are. Okay, tell me about that.
Right. So if you, let's see, open up but don't quite yet play the joined video A1C92.
All right.
Sorry to the audience.
Everybody's going to bear with me because I think it's going to play when I open it, but I'll pause it. So
yeah, there should be a pause button there.
So everybody just bear. Hold on a second.
All right. So what you'll see here, what you do see here, and what you'll hear is this is a setup I had for a live show I did downtown Houston at an art studio where people were dancing, mostly techno artists and DJs, and I went on and did a live Eurorack set, which is kind of either is going to be very interesting or just sounds so bad you want to just puke your guts out and just run away. And I'll be honest, my performance was somewhere between the two. But in prepping for that, I took this video and I just grabbed something, Sean, right before the show. I just happened to remember this moment, so I grabbed it. It's not like my best work or anything representative of my music, but when you're creating music using a combination of analog circuits, digital circuits and synthesis, sequencers, which are a logic that ties all of that together to some form of a clock, so you have rhythmical symmetry throughout your composition. And then you have the algorithms that affect either those FX we're talking about, or they affect the logic, so that you get all sorts of different if-then type of scenarios. And when you play this, you know, obviously this was not done thinking about this conversation that would happen, you know, some 5 years later. I think this is how old this video is. but when you hear it, you'll hear, I'm just listening and doing a few things where my mind kind of goes. I'm not trying to make a track, but you'll hear a few things I think I do where you hear the algorithm just shift it a little bit. And that is you'll hear the sonic representation of this concept. So go ahead and play it. I'll talk over it if I need to.
All right. I don't know if people will hear you, so I'll give you a thumbs up if I can hear you talking over it, but let's have a listen and a watch here.
Over. Okay.
If I turn
so that's
down,
that.
There you go.
Yeah, you can't hear me, or you can?
I can now. I turned it down. So there you go.
Okay. So that's a sequencer. That black thing with the red dots, that's a logical sequencer sending electrical impulses to all these other modules that are creating the beats, creating the parts of the drum beat, this or that. And this is me creatively finding my way through what is the environment I have here. And from this, once I find my way into a beat that is holistically attractive to my ears, I'll then subtract all those parts one at a time to get down to the essence and build it up and then build it back down. And then that's techno. I mean, that's already your 3-minute track, right? So the creative process might take an hour, a day, half hour, 2 days, 3 weeks. You might have a patch that's going before you find your way into both your own personal space where you have time and mental space like you're talking about, or you have like the groove that you actually care about enough to turn into a finished track, right? Because that's a commitment as an artist. But there, in that video, there's nearly, I would say 80% of those modules do have firmware that can be updated and needs to be updated. And another, whatever, 15% would be pure analog circuitry that is, we call it burned in circuitry. It is what it is. Right. And I think that is kind of to answer your question. The reason I like this Eurorack stuff is because, how do I put this? When we start to, in my mind, I've been thinking about AI in this very specific context, which is that, and when I look at that desk with all those pedals and all those cables, I'm pretty confident in my own ego as an artist and as a human being that there's no AI on Earth that will ever be able to create that sound at that moment, that kind of combined esoteric collision of sounds, right? Orchestra. But the truth is, AI very much can do that to the extent an author focuses on that problem, creates a data set, models all of that, and prepares it as an environment that I could interact with to recreate to get somewhere there. And so my confidence is really not that AI can't do it. It's that no human is going to hire AI to get there and spend the money of deconstructing all that, right?
I want to bring it up again. No, hopefully I'm going to pause it.
Yeah.
But I just want to look at it again. For a couple of reasons. One on the AI point, but just all those cables. I mean, I have a few gadgets. Nothing looks like this. I just have a few things that I plug in. And I know where sound's coming in, where it's going out, and where I look at it and tweak it. I don't have all these cables and all that kind of stuff. So people looking at this, maybe describe.
Yeah.
How do you know what goes in, what goes out from which thing to the next? Is it trial and error over time? Will it not work if it's not set up the right way, quote unquote, the right way, or do you not set it up the right way so you get different things from it that you want to get? I don't know.
That's beautiful. The way you phrase that, especially towards the end there, Sean, is so on point. So there are rules to follow to reach certain outcomes that a normal human or musician would relate to and care about. There are many rules that you want to learn so that you kind of know how to get to where you want to go creatively and compositionally and physics-wise. All of this is just physics. And the two primary worlds of physics that you're looking at here are sound, vibrations, electrical, energy, and then logic. And logic can either exist in the digital realm, as you see in the foreground there, that black device with the 1.06. That is an all digitally logic piece of computation. It's a sequencer. But once it comes to an output, it outputs a single electrical pulse, a tick. Tick. It goes across the wires as a trigger. And that trigger will tell one of these other modules adjacent to it, right, will tell it to do a damn thing. And what that damn thing is depends on the design and intent of the module, but also the user's connection of that module as an independent module and its configuration or its connection to all the other modules. And so the more wires you see, the more entropy and chance you have for both happy accidents as well as sonic mayhem and annoying sound. Like you can easily, if you don't know what you're doing, and you walked up there and told your kid to turn knobs, it's going to turn into a train wreck really fast.
Right.
Atonals, algorithms that are not aligned to the same clocks. I mean, it's just shit. So to keep it on track and keep it interesting and keep it simple enough to still be called musical is a total mental balance game. I mean, these are some of my
This is
favorite.
why I wanted to take you, because
Yeah.
this is the many times many computational. I mean, you add one more cable and it's a completely different thing, perhaps, or one more pedal or one more whatever, change the tune tempo. You, Scott Shagghie, designed this, and you know not all of them. You know the permutations that you want to hear by trial and error, or by design. So I go back to the AI thing, where what would it sample? It's going to sample all the crap too, not just what you have spent years working to find as a range or a space or the peripheral or outside the boundaries that work for you, right? And so I don't know.
Okay, so there's a question there. I already know what it is, and I love it. So one of the interesting things about this Euro rack scene, Euro like Europe, rack, one word, Euro rack. One thing that's interesting is that it's really hard to, if like you say, I'm going to get into Euro rack, we call it Euro crack, because once you buy one module, you buy another, guitar pedals. But once you get into Eurorack, you want to create your first, what we call a case, which is like, some physical thing that holds these things that you can arrange them and power them up. Behind there, there's a power board and all that, right? Well, in so doing, you really don't know what you don't know, but you kind of want to hear how it might sound. So there is software that takes the logic and the synthesis even of a lot of these modules and creates a software version of this module and a makeshift virtual case, and you can interconnect them and kind of hear how two modules kind of interplay. But the reason I mention that is because wouldn't it be interesting to apply AI to that software so they can stay in a digital realm and have perfect control where you don't need to analog manipulate these wires? Right. I think that would be very interesting what AI might do there. And largely to do with the data, the training set it trains on. Like I could literally go through this photo and tell you walk through each module, and every knob and every port and hole ultimately goes back to something you could buy at a Guitar Center for your guitar, for your electric guitar. I mean, everything in there is almost a guitar pedal at this point. And it's just about Eurorack tries to condense that to give you a lot of power in a small amount of space. And then you take that thing on the road and you have, in the 60s, this synthesizer here would take up probably 6 rooms. I mean, just not what's in the photo there, but I know the rest of that case, and it goes in front of you as well. And that setup is probably about 6 rooms worth of circuitry and logic that you'd have to orchestrate in the 60s, right? So
were you on? I think you were on with, we had Seth on with you, didn't we? Seth Cluett.
Yeah, I remember that. That was interesting conversation. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to be meeting with him as well, and I'm fingers crossed going to get a view into some of the Nokia Lab stuff, which I'm expecting to see kind of what you just described, a giant room with stuff and cables.
Yeah, I mean you just summed up my life. I used to hack as a network hacker in the 90s. I had a server room in my garage where I would hack. And eventually I got tired of hacking computers and software, and I started hacking music. And I found, and I've shared this with you, but for your audience, that it's a much more meaningful, deeper, more difficult, more challenging, more subjective, painful from a blues soul kind of artist perspective. Hackers go through their own kind of pain through persistence and rejection and fear and insecurities and so do musicians. And so I feel like when you're hacking music, it puts you into more soul enriching hacking mind states where you kind of find yourself through the experience better than when I was hacking as a computer. And I'm sure that's different for absolutely every human on earth, as it should be. But for me personally, I can't go back after trying to hack through what I'll loosely call sound and logic, and the nexus of those two things that we might call music. You know,
Well, I'm going to talk about that because you said most of the questions when we start talking about AI, and I'll expand it to not just AI but technology in general. Because some people who see what you have there and hear what you create might have an opinion based on what I'm about to say and ask here. Because consuming, right? Does somebody like music generated by AI? Does somebody like art that was generated or influenced or started with AI that then was augmented with human stuff? That's always going to be up to the receiver, the person consuming that. So I'm not going to put you on the spot because it'll always be it depends. You personally, where does technology, yeah, obviously there's a lot of tech there, so you like hacking the tech. Where does technology stop and it turns to Scott and you say, I'm not going to cross over? Or is there a line that you won't cross over that says, I will always use my brain and my hands and my ears for this, period? Has that changed over time? Do you see it changing in the future? I have my own personal opinion. I'll share if you want to hear, but after you.
Okay. Well, such a beautiful and loaded question, but it has changed recently since LLMs came out. In AI, in that regard, has actually literally fundamentally changed my view of this historical dichotomy. Like every guitarist, every drummer, for example, has a bumper sticker that hates drum machines. Like going back to the 80s and 90s, they thought the drum machine would remove the drummer. And to some extent, there were really good bands like Berlin that came out with drum machine music, and we were just like, "Oh my God, drum machines are dope."
So let me make a point here because I pointed to myself. Electronic drums, I hate.
Yes.
Drum machine,
Mm.
I adore a drum machine.
Okay. Well, so yeah, the drum, like the pads with the samples, and you're hitting those, and it's not acoustic. Yeah. Okay. So this is the dichotomy in synthesis as well. There's always been a overriding belief that analog synthesis, the analog domain of using actual analog circuits, has an infinitely more sonic soundscape potential than the digital realm. And through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, the aliasing you would hear in everything from using Ableton Live for a digital audio workstation to a digital pedal from Behringer or Boss, you would argue over it. You would have philosophical, pot smoking, beer drinking, conversations about like analog versus digital, and that was always this thing. And I always kind of, as an analog artist, I was personally biased, right? I did have strong opinions that the analog was superior in certain ways that humans wanted to relate to, that drew them in instead of pushed them away. And the conversations went on for nights, and more than we have time for here. But where I've gone lately, just kind of fast forward, is I don't now currently, as I stand here, put any particular limits on myself. And the inspiration for that in either domain or combination of the domains, because the interaction with LLMs that I've had over the last 4 months specifically versus the last 2 years has really fundamentally altered my view of what is intelligence. I no longer look at it as a human versus artificial intelligence, and the differences of the two. Much like my view to solve racism was always to focus on the things that we have in common versus the differences that set us apart. And that's the mechanism overcoming. I've also looked at intelligence this way, where like intelligence is about something more than humanity or humans as a life form, and more than machines and logic and what we call AI. It's literally something that is its own thing, right? It deserves its own caveat as an entity, intelligence. And intelligence is really, for me, only now measurable by speed, velocity towards an outcome, right? And our human minds are actually very slow. We run at like 10 megabytes per second clock compared to AI, which is insanely fast, let alone quantum around the corner or literally here already. So I step back and like when it comes to music, man, nothing. It's almost opened my mind to a new possibility. You do need some rules in music as a musician, not as philosophically, but as a musician, you need some kind of box to paint yourself in so that you're doing a damn thing, right? You have, because you said to a canvas with a paintbrush and a palette, you have to have some kind of intention. You can't just say, I'm going to go paint today. You can, but it's not going to end up being very interesting to you. The experience might be whatever. Maybe you get some kinesthetic grit out or anger out, but the paint is not going to look very beautiful, right? So you have to have a box or intention, and then you have to give yourself permission to break those rules in that box to the extent it brings you joy, and you have killed your ego enough to allow yourself to pivot when you hear the happy accident, right? Because I start with this intention. It's a 909 in music, 909 kick and a hi-hat and a bass line that goes like this in my head when I'm taking a shower. I run to the studio to recreate that moment. By the time I'm done, I can't remember the original thing. I'm on to something totally different, but I honored the fact that where I found myself was better than where I started with my intention. And I'm okay with that deviation. And this is how I approach now this analog versus digital thing we're talking about. I don't care. I'll go full digital if it suits me in the moment towards an original intention that is attached to an inspiration. You have to have equal parts inspiration and intention. You can't go in without inspiration. That's futile and it makes you sad. Right? So I try not to rush art or force art. Right? When I'm trying to get better at my art, but I'm not inspired, that's when I'll pick up AI and study music making as an academic thing. So I can make myself smarter, but I don't have to worry about being a productive musician. So, yeah.
Well, you said joy in at the end of the last thing you mentioned, and to me, it's that plays a huge thing because you said the opposite of if you don't have the inspiration, don't have the box you're attacking, it may not be joyful, right? Everybody has their own thing. Maybe pain is joyful for some folks, or angst and discomfort is pain. But yeah, so I know I completely hear you, and yeah, just my very quick view on that is that I guess I look to things for inspiration, and perhaps other work, technology, AI might give me that inspiration. To your point, I don't set out to say I want to do something. I need the inspiration. Give it to me. So I wouldn't go to for like, I don't know, lyrics come to my head. I won't go to AI and finish them or refine them. I figure that they're going to come as they come, and that's what I want out of it. That it might be a little challenging, but that's the box, right? And as I bump up against the edges,
Okay, question for you. Yeah. Is your box there on purpose because you want to reserve a part of your ego and authority and your agency over your art? Or is it there because you're just honoring an artistic process that you enjoy by excluding turning to AI to, let's say, finish your lyrics, right? To use your example, right? Is it there's a word for that. Is it a matter of principle for you, or is it a creative choice?
Principle is the right word, I think. And yeah, I think for me, it's that journey, right? And if I'm giving part of the journey to something else, and I'm using AI in this example now on the drum machine, I'm giving that part of the journey to a drum machine instead of sitting down with a bunch of mics at my drum kit, right? Partly because the drum kit's a pain in the ass and to mic up and all that, and I can only get a certain sound out of it, whereas the drum machine, endless possibilities, right?
Phil Collins overnight.
Yeah. So sometimes, in that sense, I leverage the technology to give me, and a lot of times my inspiration comes from a beat, and then the melody's in my head somewhere. I'm a drummer, so the beat's what gives me the inspiration, and then kind of the rest of it builds around it. And I definitely use the heck out of technology to do that.
Yeah,
But
I
I guess
think
I don't know, maybe I'm just not keen on AI. I don't know. For maybe it's the lyrics. I don't know. I wouldn't turn to AI to write music. It sounds like you've been doing a bit of that as well.
Well,
Or
so
not.
I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she's a singer, songwriter, and performer. She's been taking pro music lessons from a Grammy award-winning woman for 6 years now, since she's a little kid. She sang at the Do Si Do. She's amazing. Her music is beautiful. And she played at a wedding and made everybody cry in a good way. Uh, like she's phenomenal. And when I'm trying to raise her, I do use AI for what I would call sake of automation. You only have so much time in a day as a father. All fathers feel like they're failing their daughter or their child because they're not spending enough time that's quality. And so, in that kind of panic, regret you're trying to avoid, you might use AI to get yourself there faster. And that could be lyrics, but it could also be composition. It can also be these tools now where you just plug in, give me a beat like Michael Jackson's, Beat It, and a melody from Adele, and push them together for me, and let's hear something. And AI will do that for you. But all of a sudden, you got a chord progression, you've got a bass line, you've got a drum kit going. It's all artificially produced. But you know what? If I give her that framework and I strip the vocals, and she comes up now with her own vocals and her own inflection and her own way of singing it, and her own melody on top, let's say, I can then take the audio into my DAW, deconstruct the parts using other AI software to kind of go backwards against the AI and part it out into MIDI files. And then now I'm turning analog knobs that are being triggered by digital MIDI that was reversed from AI, that was inspired by AI, which is inspired by a 10-year-old. And I'm okay with all of that.
Yeah.
Like, I use the tool to get my daughter to where she needs to be so that she can sing on that stage. And I don't care what tool it is, I will use it. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's kind of helped me change too as an artist. A lot of what I do now is like one of these that website I sent you is just Katie, my wife and I. And we made music together for a period of time, probably like 5-6 years. We even performed at TourCon live in San Diego at one of the hacking conferences, right? And it was live. It was crazy. He had a mic, and I had all my a table full of synthesizers, and we performed the track that I sent you. And it's doing music with family is great, and I feel like AI could either threaten that and distract from it, or be used creatively. Like AI is dual use. It can definitely be not necessarily used with intention to bring you down, but if you misuse your tool, you're going to bring yourself down. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why it's still a depends answer. But
Well,
I have right, but I
you
have
have,
my version of it,
yeah.
and your version of it, and that's why I love hearing your story. I think the fact that we're different places. I'm not performing. I'm not recording. I'm just messing around. So it's
These days, that's what I'm doing too. Yeah, I'm not out there anymore. Yeah.
but it's a moment for me to push boundaries on learning something new. It feels good. I love holding the instruments, the feel of the instruments, actually pushing the buttons and turning the knobs and hearing the sounds come out. Um, I'm not teaching a kid music. So I love your story about how you're using all the tools and technology to
Yeah.
fast track certain areas of learning and inspire creativity and also present stuff that's complete as a way. Again, that sets one boundary of the box, right? When you present something that exists already, then one can start to move around it or leapfrog it or whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that AI is sounds like a meme when you say the word AI these days, but when it comes to music, right? To narrow it down, AI will forever now be a part of every musician's creative process, whether they like it, choose it, want it, or not. And the reason for that is most licks that you get when you're taking a shower and you're washing your armpit and that bass line hits or that beat, you've heard some version of that. And so I knew a guy for a while, one of our good friends, my kid's uh, godfather, if you will. He worked in LA for Jimmy Ivy and did big bands like Lady Gaga and One Republic. So we were having dinner one night with One Republic, and that main singer and band manager or guy's name is Ryan. And at one point, I don't know, this is probably like 12 years ago, if you turned on a song on the FM radio, of the top 10 songs, he had written all 10 of them, not 9 out of 10. Literally, he had a monopoly on songwriting for all artists that you would hear in the top 10. And he had a very specific set of formulas and approach, I guess, that allowed him to be that productive and that lucrative and all that. And I think AI now has supplanted folks like that. I hate saying this out loud, and I know I have a lot of friends in Hollywood that are equally upset about AI replacing them as actors or voiceover, for animations. But the truth is that AI is so prevalent in the digital audio workstation that whether it's a sound like from mastering and mixing, whether it's a guitar sound, whatever that thing is that you think somebody's a genius for creating, there's a really good chance that these days you're not hearing somebody honor a happy accident on an analog guitar pedal fit into some weird amp in a corner in a cave. It's rather you heard somebody turn an AI knob a certain way and said, yeah, that's interesting. Like Billie Eilish, I hear a lot of AI in her music. That might sound like blasphemy to her fans, and I might be totally wrong too. But I can tell you, the way I experience her music is very algorithmically. The drum machines, the 808 samples that she, all that stuff, the way it hits, I hear a very digital clock instead of an analog clock. Like her drum machines are not analog, and that's a subtle thing. Most people don't even care, but you hear it nonetheless. Like whether your brain breaks it down and you're conscious and understands it academically or not, the way you experience the digital versus analog drum sequencer or player, which is the original analog drum sequencer, right, is very different. The clock hits different. So,
yeah, and this very philosophical point here, and maybe one of our first ever video episodes. You remember the Unusual Gatherings? I think we may have talked about this years and years ago. Just the idea of the world we're creating, and will we want to harken back to less technology, right? Will we yearn for the days of that real drum over the. I think there's always going to be a place. My point is, I think, are we moving in a direction where the physical stuff goes and the digital starts to take over, and with it becomes what you just described, in my opinion, a world of perfection.
Yeah,
where everything is perfect, and there's a common denominator, a common line. I don't know.
Well, in the 90s, Sean, when the internet was at its dawn and I was raving, when you went to a techno rave with the lights and the experience and all that, you had this sense that the future was coming. And techno and technology and the internet and hacking and all these, the cypherpunks I used to hang out with, we all felt like we were building this future thing. And the allure of techno, walking to that rave, hearing that bass hit you with a drum sequencer instead of a drummer, right? Like that beat, that techno beat, it brought you towards some beautiful future that you thought that you were creating with your friends. I think we're way past that now, and now we are very much missing. We are lonely for our analog biological selves. Our interplay as humans as well as social beings. Yeah. And so I think that techno is almost, when you hear like Detroit techno, it brings me back to like what I imagine my father hears when he hears Joni Mitchell play guitar, right, from the 60s, right? So like it's like it brings him back in a sentimental way of walking into a warehouse. That's what gives me joy when I make a drum beat with a drum machine, right? I think if you think of a movie where you have like zombies, it's post-apocalyptic, and somebody walks into like a beat-up pawn shop and there's a guitar and they start playing it, and people are dying all around, but you just got this moment where somebody strums a guitar. even in a movie, it just kind of draws you in, like, oh my God, what you would give for a guitar when the world is indeed ending, right? That kind of answers your question. I think we're always going to long for the past.
Yeah. Well, what's one of the famous scenes on the Titanic, right?
Oh, the piano?
The band playing.
Oh, the band. Oh, yeah, the ship's going down and they're playing.
Yeah. Well, I went listened to some music the other night, and the drummer I saw, both drummers were amazing. He let some guy sit in the last song, and I thought this is going to be a disappointment compared to what I just saw. He was amazing too.
Oh.
But this drummer, I was like, how the hell is he doing that? Hands don't move that fast. You can't reach 3 drum heads in that frame of time. It's not possible, and it was quite something to experience, and over the top in some spots, and maybe a little too much in some spots, and not on beat in terms of a beat that you'd want to feel in here.
Yeah.
But impressive nonetheless. But they're purposeful, not mistakes, just purposefully that way. But incredible, I guess, is the main point. And that was all a human. I was like, this was a treat to experience. Speaking of treat to experience, we're at the end here. I wanted to play that track you shared with me. Is that something we could do?
Yeah. Just one thought on what you just described. I used to go to the Long Beach Jazz Festival a while back, and Barbara Morrison was one of the singers that would tour that. Hopefully she's still alive. She was elderly even back then. One of the best just blues singers you ever heard just belt out. And she stepped up there, and she had this, I'll never forget, this drummer and this bassist, just the 3 of them. And, the bass player was just ahead of the drums, and everything was in the pocket. And, she had that little kind of body English that just got the room popping. It's kind of asymmetrical pop.
Yeah.
And, those kind of moments when her voice inflection is literally fluttering off of the cymbals in a weird kind of way that she's not necessarily, she might very well, she's so trained, but through voice inflections, but her style matched the drum and the bass. Like, that's how she sang. And these are the kind of moments, especially in jazz and blues, is where I was going, that I think it'll be interesting to see what AI does when asked to complete those moments as an objective. When you interface with LMs and you ask them to be creative, they can get kind of funny and weird and dark and just all sorts of weird stuff, right? But I think that when it comes to music in particular, I'm ultimately super curious about if they can pull off a Miles Davis moment. Now, they'll train off of Miles Davis, so the answer might be yes. That's the weird thing about it.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So this
exactly what it's trained on. Exactly.
So this track is the one that we performed at TourCon a number of years ago, probably TourCon 3 or something in San Diego. And it was the second and only time we ever performed live. The other time was when I proposed to Katie Rocket during a show.
There you go. Well, how long is it? Should I play it out?
I don't play, just go through like the first verse. Unfortunately, this one, I think the intro might be a little long. So you could either needle drop it or we talk over it and then play through the verse and the chorus. And that's, cut it off after the verse and chorus.
All right. Yeah, we'll let it go for a bit here and then we'll wrap up. Here we go.
But this is her as a punk rock singer playing at like the Belly Up in San Diego, me being a techno producer, trying to come up with a genre that we both didn't fight over. I produced all the music. She did all the lyrics and vocals.
Nice one. Katie Rocket, Escape. Here we go.
Sounds a bit precious.
Is it?
Yeah, the resolution's a little low through here. That's fine. It's all good. Some people think she sounds like Madonna when she sings. I don't know if I hear it. Really good.
I wake up each and every day, hear my looking glass birds whisper my name, tells me stop running, quit hiding my face. I can't keep living trapped in this space.
Yeah, so the chorus is pretty powerful.
I know my
Yeah.
I love it. I presume we can share that with folks.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll let we can let people listen to the full track and enjoy Katie Rocket.
Yeah, there you go.
I love that beat. Her voice is amazing too, and
Yeah.
you're a good duo.
I mean, it was fun, right? Like you just music. I look at music these days, like when you go to art studio, like art is nothing less than a dialogue. So like when you take in art just yourself, if you're all alone in the world, it's never going to be quite the same as having anybody next to you. It doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, what their education, appreciation, just asking them the simplest question about what's in front of them, that you're looking at the same thing at the same time, is a separate kind of joy that you get as an artist. Same with music, so I think that's why DJs want to eventually produce, like, I want to make a track that moves all those bodies and I want to hit the button, right? Like, that's what we all want. You know what I mean? So I think art is a dialogue, whether it's music or canvas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, keep creating, keep enjoying. What do I say? Let the music move you. That's probably from somebody else, but nonetheless, I think this is a conversation that moved me, my friend. It's always good to see you and chat with you, and you always make my mind spin with the way you think and the work that you do, and yeah, I love your music. I love you, and I'm so glad you joined me for this episode, my friend.
It's good to be back here at this show, just seeing your voice and hearing your face, hearing your voice, seeing your face. Soon we got my canvas and my music transposed. But yeah, it's great. I hope to say hi to Marco at some point soon too. So that'd be great.
I'm keeping you away from him.
For now.
No, Marco's good. He's enjoying storytelling on his show, Audio Signals, and funny enough, a name Audio Signals, but it's about storytelling. But no, we enjoy you, my friend, and thanks for this. Thanks for sharing your music. Thanks for sharing your setup. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed the conversation, and looking at how technology connects with music and us as human beings. So Scott, thanks so much. Everybody, thanks for joining, watching, listening, and do stay tuned for more Music Evolves. We'll see you on the next one.